All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children. And God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendis est. Awaken your inner Neanderthal, supercharging your life with 8 evolutionary secrets. Written by Conrad Riker. Available now. Links in description. Evolutionary biology, masculinity. A cold shower for comfortable lies. I was in the room when Dr. Winona Brixton Sable, tenured, published, triangulated, indexed, footnoted, peer-reviewed, and spiritually fortified by 3 decades of unchallenged seminar room consensus, delivered her 90-second confession. A man in a wrinkled suit had asked her to define a word. That was the crime. Not a slur, not a sneer, not a power play, a definition request. Her eye twitched, her voice dropped into that rehearsed contrabass she reserves for white male audacity, and she leaned into the microphone like a pastor who had just discovered a heretic in the 3rd row. What followed was not an answer. It was an exorcism in reverse, a woman summoning her demons and calling them angels, live streamed to 10,000 students who would later describe it as powerful without being able to say what it meant. The rant felt morally intense because it was moral, just not in the direction it claimed. Winona was not defending the marginalized. She was performing a liturgy of status, a sacred drama in which her refusal to answer a simple question became proof of virtue, and the questioner's temerity became proof of sin. The intensity came from the displacement. Every ounce of fury she directed at the man in the wrinkled suit was fury she could not direct at the void inside her own ideology. She could not define caliber because definition is measurement, measurement is hierarchy, and hierarchy is the one heresy her theology cannot tolerate unless, of course, she occupies the top of it, which she always does. Always must, always will, because her entire epistemology is a throne dressed as a clinic. Here is why her contradictions are the most useful evidence you will ever collect. A coherent ideology can be argued with. A self-refuting one can only be exposed. Winona demands subjective authority. My lived experience is your reality. While claiming objective jurisdiction, I define the terms of the conversation. She rejects hierarchy while enforcing one. She names all speech as violence while wielding speech as a weapon. She calls for safety while manufacturing danger. Each contradiction is not a flaw to patch. It is a confession to transcribe. The feminist rant is not an argument to be refuted. It is a symptom to be diagnosed. And the patient, as you will see in every chapter that follows, is always the doctor. Dr. Winona's rant, a panel interlude transcribed. The following was captured on a student's phone during the Structural Equity in the Post-Pandemic University panel at Ridacti Estate University. The video has 2.3 million views. Dr. Winona has since locked her Twitter account and published a 4,000-word response in Critical Theory Today, titled On Being Asked to Define Myself, Epistemic Violence and the Grammar of Patriarchal Demands. Oh, wow, okay, wow. So you in the wrinkled suit, you want me to define a word, you want me to stop mid-thought, mid-sentence and produce a dictionary entry for you on demand in front of this room. Let that land for a second. Everybody just let that land. A man asking a woman of color adjacent to that experience through professional alliance to stop her intellectual labor, to serve him a definition on a silver platter so he can evaluate whether it meets his standard. And we're supposed to believe this is about clarity. I know what this is. This room knows what this is. We all know what this is. This is the caliber question. This is always the caliber question. You chose that word, caliber, because it sounds neutral, it sounds reasonable, it sounds like you just want precision. But precision is a technology of control. Who decides what's precise? Who holds the instrument that measures? Who built the ruler? I'll tell you who. The same people who built every ruler, and it wasn't us. You want to know what caliber means? Caliber means bullets, etymologically. Look it up. It's a measurement of projectiles, of weaponry, of the tools of colonial expansion and patriarchal enforcement. You are literally asking me to measure human dignity in ammunition, and you don't even see the violence in that, because violence is the water you swim in. Caliber is a gun word, and you pointed it at me, and I'm supposed to say thank you for asking. But let me go deeper, because I can feel this room getting uncomfortable, and good. Growth lives in the discomfort. I've published on this. When a man asks a woman to define her terms, what he's actually doing is recentering the epistemic frame around his familiarity. He's saying, I don't live in your world, make your world legible to mine. Translate your pain into my grammar. Compress your lived experience into a footnote I can grade. That's not curiosity, that's a hostile audit. That's the IRS of the patriarchy showing up at the door of my interiority and saying, receipts, please. And the thing is, I knew this would happen. I told the organizing committee, I said, if we open this panel to general Q&A, it becomes a platform for epistemic trespassing. And they said, Winona, we value dialogue. And I said, dialogue is a technology of the center-right. And here we are in dialogue. And somebody just asked me to define a word like this is a spelling bee and not a reckoning. You know what? Let me be transparent, because transparency is a value unlike opacity, which is what your question is. Your question is opaque. It pretends to be simple. Is it quality or physical size? As if those are the only two options, as if meaning is a multiple choice exam. This is the binary thinking I wrote about in my third book, the one you clearly haven't read. No one in this demographic has read it, and yet I'm the one who has to justify my vocabulary. Binary, as in two, as in the gender binary, as in the enforcement regime that tells us there are only two answers to every question. Male or female, quality or size, right or wrong, defined or undefined. I reject your binary, I reject your dichotomy, I reject the framework that says every word must mean one thing or it's useless. Let me tell you what caliber actually means in this context. In my context, in the context of structural equity, which is the title of this panel, which you would know if you had been listening instead of loading your question like a rifle. Caliber means worth. It means who counts. It means whose labor gets measured and whose gets erased. It means the implicit hierarchy that says some people's contributions are high caliber and others are what? Low caliber, no caliber. Who survives that audit? Because I'll tell you who doesn't. We don't. Women, queer scholars, scholars of color. Anyone whose knowledge production doesn't look like a man in a suit asking, what does that word mean with the confidence of someone who has never had his right to exist in a room questioned? And I see you nodding. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Because you feel it. You feel the violence of being asked to justify your presence every single day. This man, he doesn't feel it. He's never had to feel it. He walks into rooms and the rooms conform to him. The air conforms to him. The vocabulary conforms to him. He says, define your terms, and the whole room turns to me like I'm the problem. I'm not the problem. The question is the problem. The framework that produces the conditions of possibility for that question is the problem. Impact over intent. Say it with me. Impact over intent. I don't care that you just wanted clarity. The impact of your question is that a woman, again, has to stop her work to prove she knows what she's talking about, to a man who, let's be honest, has not done the reading, has not sat with the discomfort, has not interrogated his complicity in the systems of caliber measurements that have excluded voices like mine for centuries. Your intent is innocent, your impact is structural violence. And here's what's really rich. Here's the gala of it all. You think you're being rigorous, you think you're being Socratic, you think asking what do you mean by that makes you a philosopher. It doesn't. It makes you a border patrol agent of the epistemic state. You're checking my papers, you're saying, show me your credentials for using that word. And if I don't produce them to your satisfaction, you'll dismiss everything I've said as incoherent, which is coincidentally what every empire has ever done to every colonized knowledge tradition. We don't understand your healing practices, so they must be witchcraft. We don't understand your governance, so it must be savagery. We don't understand your pronouns, so they must be made up. You are doing that right now with your question. My truth is my truth. My lived experience is data. It is evidence. It is peer-reviewed by my body. And your binary question, quality or size, is erasure. It is epistemic erasure. You are erasing my right to mean what I mean without your stamp. My truth is your erasure. Let me say that again. My truth is your erasure. Because my truth exposes the structures that make your question possible, and that exposure erases your comfort. And comfort, your comfort, is the currency of oppression. And you know what? I'm tired. I'm tired of being interrupted by curiosity that's really interrogation. I'm tired of being defined by people who can't even define themselves. I'm tired of men who have never questioned a single assumption they've inherited walking into rooms and saying, "Excuse me, could you clarify?" Clarify. As if my work is muddy, as if I'm opaque, as if the problem isn't your lens but my text. Maybe the problem is that you don't have the capacity for what I'm saying. Maybe the caliber of your comprehension is the issue. Did you ever think of that? That you're the one who's undersized for this conversation? Pause. I need to breathe, because this is the body keeps the score. And my body is scored by every man who has ever demanded I make myself smaller so he can feel bigger. That's what your question does. It asks me to shrink, to compress, to reduce my intellectual inheritance to a glossary entry you can circulate in your citation network and call your idea in 6 months. I see you. We see you. The algorithm sees you. So no, I will not define caliber for you. I will not reduce my framework to your vocabulary test. I will not perform legibility for your comfort. I will not translate my theory into your language, so you can grade it with your patriarchal red pen. Silence is violence, and your question is a weapon disguised as curiosity, and I am done being curious about your feelings about my words. Listen and learn, or leave. But do not ask me to define myself for you again. The room applauds. The man in the wrinkled suit says nothing. The student's phone records 14 more seconds of Winona adjusting her lanyard, taking a sip of water, and whispering to the panelist beside her. Did you get all that? That's going in the book. The video ends. The deconstruction. The rant as evidence. A man in a wrinkled suit raised his hand and asked a tenured professor to define a word she had just used. What followed was not an answer. It was 90 seconds of unbroken projective confession, a spectacle so rich in diagnostic value that it belongs in every future textbook on ideological possession. Alongside the show trials and struggle sessions it so faithfully mirrors, Dr. Winona, Associate Professor of Gender and Critical Theory at a mid-tier state university, was seated on a panel titled Structural Equity in the Post-Pandemic University. The word in question was caliber. The man asked whether she meant quality or physical size, a reasonable question. A question any honest scholar would answer in fewer than 5 seconds. Quality in this context, moving on. Instead, the room received a monologue, and that monologue is evidence not of the man's aggression, not of structural violence, not of epistemic trespassing, but of an ideological system caught mid-operation, exposed like a pickpocket whose hand is still in the coat. What the transcript reveals is not an argument. It is a cascade of defensive maneuvers, language captures, slogan deployments, and satanic inversions, each one accidentally confessing what the speaker cannot consciously admit. That her entire intellectual framework is a rationalization for the absence of the very excellence she was asked to clarify. The rant is useful precisely because it is unscripted. The carefully maintained mask of scholarly detachment slipped. What emerged was raw appetite for status, for control, for the power to define reality without submitting to definition herself. Every sentence is a tell. Every slogan is a shield. Every accusation is a mirror. Read it not as speech but as symptom. The patient is describing her condition, what she accidentally confessed. The first rule of forensic analysis: the accusation reveals the accuser. When someone projects with this level of intensity, the content of the projection maps precisely onto the projector's own concealed motives. Dr. Winona accused the man of a power move she performed 7. She accused him of centering himself. She then monopolized the microphone, the room's attention, and the narrative for 90 unbroken seconds, concluding with a whispered note to a colleague. Did you get all that? That's going in the book. The centering was entirely hers. The man said nothing. He disappeared. She expanded to fill the space he vacated and then accused him of taking up too much of it. This is not argumentation. It is projective confession in its purest clinical form. She accused him of treating her intellectual labor as a service to be extracted. She then demanded that the entire room, the panel, and the organizing committee conform to her emotional state, stopping the discussion, performing a collective silence, let that land, and validating her reaction as politically significant. She extracted intellectual and emotional labor from everyone present to service her grievance. The man asked one question. She commandeered an institution. She accused him of loading his question like a rifle. She then deployed a pre-prepared rhetorical arsenal, etymological gotchas, slogan cascades, references to her own publications, therapeutic vocabulary, and the threat of institutional consequences. I told the organizing committee. Her 90 seconds were rehearsed. His 5-word question was not, "Who brought the weapon?" But the deepest confession came in her attack on his capacity. She suggested, with venom barely disguised as analysis, that the problem was not her opacity but his comprehension. Maybe the caliber of your comprehension is the issue. Did you ever think of that? That you're the one who's undersized for this conversation. There it is, the tell that detonates the entire performance. She invoked caliber as an insult, measuring his intellectual inadequacy against her standard, while simultaneously claiming that caliber is a patriarchal weapon she refuses to define. She used the word as a blade the moment it served her, after spending 90 seconds arguing that using it as a blade was violence. She cannot define caliber because she has none. She attacks definition because definition would reveal the absence. Her entire career, gender studies, critical theory, structural equity discourse, is a machinery for converting that absence into a virtue. If she cannot produce excellence, she can at least demonize the standard that measures it. And that is exactly what she did. The slogan machine. Strip away the therapeutic theater, and what remains is a stack of prefabricated phrases, each one a self-sealing rhetorical loop designed to end conversation rather than advance it. These are not arguments. They are verbal closures, linguistic devices that make dissent impossible by relabeling it as harm. Your definition is a power move. This converts a request for clarity into an act of aggression. It is a category error of staggering proportions. A question becomes a weapon, and the questioner becomes an oppressor, simply by asking. The slogan makes intellectual engagement impossible, because any engagement from the wrong person is pre-classified as domination. Impact over intent, this slogan grants the listener unilateral authority to define the moral character of the speaker's act, regardless of what the speaker actually meant. It is an invitation to bad faith. Under this rule, the most fragile or strategic interpreter wins. The speaker is stripped of self-defense. It is, in essence, the abolition of mens rea for speech, the elimination of intent as a relevant category. In any legal tradition worth the name, intent matters. In Dr. Winona's ideology, it is the only thing that does not. Silence is violence, a phrase that means its opposite. If silence is violence, then compelled speech is peace. The slogan inverts the natural order of free conscience. You must speak, and you must speak approved words, or you are committing harm. It is a license for coercion dressed in the vocabulary of justice. My truth is your erasure. This is the most revealing slogan in the stack. It concedes in 5 words that her truth cannot survive coexistence with other truths. It is not robust. It does not welcome scrutiny. It does not build consensus. It erases and must erase to survive. A truth that requires the silencing of others is not a truth. It is a territory claim. Listen and learn, a command disguised as pedagogy. It establishes a one-way hierarchy. She speaks, you absorb. Dissent is recast as failure to learn. Questions become evidence of ignorance. The phrase eliminates the student's right to evaluate the lesson. It is the grammar of indoctrination, not education. That's a very binary way to look at it. The Swiss Army knife of postmodern deflection, deployed whenever a binary choice would expose the speaker's incoherence. The irony is lethal. Binary or not binary is itself a binary, and by rejecting binaries, she has deployed one. The slogan is self-refuting upon contact with logic. Each slogan is a closed system. None invites response. None survives scrutiny. Each functions as a rhetorical quarantine, sealing off the speaker from challenge while signaling in-group loyalty to those who already share the premises. They are not tools of communication, they are tools of control. The wrong idea underneath. Beneath the slogans, beneath the etymological sleight of hand, beneath the therapeutic vocabulary, there is a single wrong idea, and it is the load-bearing wall of the entire ideological structure. That definition is oppression, and ambiguity is liberation. This is the postmodern move applied with surgical precision. If meaning is constructed rather than discovered, then defining a word is not clarifying reality, it is enforcing a power structure. To demand definition is to demand conformity to a framework that benefits the definer. Clarity becomes coercion, precision becomes violence. And the only liberatory act is to keep meaning fluid, shifting, permanently unresolved. Except for one problem. Dr. Winona defined words constantly throughout her rant. She defined caliber as etymologically linked to bullets and colonialism. She defined the man's question as a hostile audit. She defined dialogue as a technology of the center-right. She defined binary thinking as an enforcement regime. She was indefatigable in her definitions, provided she was the one doing the defining. The rule is not definition is oppression. The rule is your definition is oppression, mine is scholarship. This is not a principled rejection of fixed meaning. It is a power bid for monopoly over meaning. Dr. Winona does not want to abolish the dictionary. She wants to write it. The deeper era is epistemological. If truth is merely a function of power, a narrative that serves the powerful, then the speaker's own claim to truth is merely a bid for power, not a discovery about reality. The theory refutes itself. If all knowledge is situated and partial, then her knowledge is situated and partial, and she has no grounds to demand it be treated as authoritative. If objectivity is a patriarchal fiction, then her diagnosis of patriarchy is also a fiction, or at best, one story among many with no privilege over the man's story. But she does not act as though her view is one story among many. She acts as though it is a revelation. She demands the authority of objectivity while denying its possibility. She wants the crown without the coronation. She wants her subjective experience treated as public fact while insisting that public facts are only disguised subjectivities. This is not a coherent epistemology. It is an institutional power grab wearing epistemological clothing. The syllogism destroys her position in 3 steps. Premise 1, her claim, truth is socially constructed and serves power. Premise 2, her claim, her analysis reveals this construction. Conclusion, her analysis is also a social construction serving her power, and therefore has no greater claim to truth than the view she is criticizing. The theory eats itself. She is sitting on a branch she is sawing through, and congratulating herself on the noise. The inversions. What Dr. Winona performed, with remarkable consistency, was a series of systematic inversions, each one taking a genuine good and standing it on its head until it became its opposite. This is the signature move of the ideology she represents. It does not merely reject the natural order. It mimics it in mirror image, using the vocabulary of virtue to enact the mechanics of tyranny. Truth inverted into harm. The man asked for a definition. Definition is the precondition of truth. You cannot evaluate a claim if you do not know what its words mean. She treated this request as an act of violence, epistemic trespassing, a hostile audit, the IRS of the patriarchy. Truth-seeking became trespassing. Curiosity became aggression. The very act of asking what someone means was reclassified as harm. This inversion makes honest inquiry impossible. If asking for definition is violence, then the only safe act is credulous silence. Justice inverted into envy. She framed the man's question as an exercise of unearned privilege, his confidence, his suit, his presumption that he had the right to ask. But justice examines conduct against a standard. Envy resents the standard itself. She did not argue that his question was unreasonable. She argued that his competence to ask it was illegitimate. That is not justice. That is resentment wearing a moral costume. She attacked not his argument, but his standing to make one, a move that reveals with surgical precision what she actually resents. His standing. Care inverted into control. She performed concern. Growth lives in the discomfort, she said, as though she were a therapist mid-session, but care respects the autonomy of the other. Control demands conformity. She did not want him to grow. She wanted him to submit. Her care was a demand for compliance, listen, learn, or leave. This is not the care of a healer, it is the care of a warden. Freedom inverted into license. She claimed liberation in her refusal to define, to be fluid, unresolved, unburdened by the tyranny of precision, but freedom is the capacity to act within the bounds of reality and duty. License is the demand to act without bound or consequence. Her refusal to define was not freedom. It was an escape hatch, a way to remain unaccountable, to mean whatever was convenient in the moment, to never be pinned down by her own words. That is not liberation. It is the psychology of the con artist refined into academic prose. Equality inverted into favoritism. She invokes structural equity, the panel's title, her professional brand, as though it were a demand for fairness. But the equity she described was not equal treatment under neutral rules. It was a demand that her subjective experience be granted authority over his reasoned question, that her discomfort trump his curiosity, that her identity shield her from the standards he was expected to meet. This is not equality, it is a hierarchy of grievance in which the most aggrieved party wins by default. Mercy inverted into due process abolition. She convicted the man in real time of aggression, of epistemic violence, of patriarchal presumption, without evidence, without cross-examination, without allowing him to speak in his own defense. She demanded that the room accept her interpretation as verdict. There was no trial, there was only sentencing, and she called this process justice. Mercy is granted after judgment. But she abolished judgment itself, or rather she kept it, but reserved it exclusively for herself. Love inverted into possession. She did not want his understanding. She wanted his silence. Listen and learn, or leave. This is not the language of someone who wishes to be understood. It is the language of someone who demands obedience. Love wills the good of the other. Possession wills the utility of the other for one's own ego. She needed him not as a participant in dialogue, but as a prop in her performance, a symbol of patriarchal ignorance against which her righteousness could shine. His silence was not a failure of his education. It was the success of her possession, undoing the spell. Each inversion can be undone. Each reversal can be reversed. The procedure is simple. Restore the word to its meaning, the standard to its function, and the good to its nature. Restore truth. Definition is not violence. It is the precondition of all communication. Without shared definitions, language collapses into noise. When the man asked what caliber meant, he was not attacking. He was participating in the oldest and most fundamental act of civilization, establishing a common vocabulary so that thought can occur. Ambiguity is not liberation. It is the weapon of the weak, the last refuge of someone who cannot survive clarity. The remedy is simple and ruthless. Demand definition. Refuse to proceed without it. If the speaker cannot define the term has no content, and the argument built on it is empty. Restore justice. The standard applies equally, or it is not a standard. If it is oppressive for a man to ask a woman to define her terms, then it is oppressive for a woman to demand that a man accept her undefined authority. The sex swap test is devastating. Imagine a male professor responding to a female student's clarifying question with 90 seconds of monologue about epistemic violence. He would be disciplined before the video reached 1,000 views. The double standard is not invisible. It is structural, and its visibility is its vulnerability. Restore care. Care tells the truth. It does not coddle, and it does not control. If the man's question revealed a gap in understanding, genuine care would fill it. With a definition, a clarification, a reference. Instead, Dr. Winona weaponized the gap, converting it into evidence of his inadequacy and her superiority. That is not care. It is exploitation of vulnerability for status gain. Restore freedom. Freedom is bounded by reality. To be free from definition is to be free from meaning, which is to be free from communication, which is to be free from relationship, which is to be free from civilization. This is not freedom. It is isolation dressed as autonomy. True freedom, the freedom that builds, protects, and transmits, requires submission to the constraints that make excellence possible. Restore equality, equal dignity under natural law, one moral standard, equal accountability for equal conduct. If definition is good for one, it is good for all. If clarity serves justice, it serves everyone. The demand for special exemption from definitional standards is not a cry for equality. It is a demand for privilege, the very charge Dr. Winona so freely leveled at others. Restore mercy. Mercy follows judgment. It does not replace it. To abolish judgment in the name of mercy is to abolish both. The man deserved a fair hearing of his question, evaluation against the standard of reasonable inquiry. Dr. Winona abolished the standard and delivered a verdict anyway. That is not mercy. It is tyranny with better PR. Restore love. Love wills the good of the other as other. It does not require submission. It does not demand silence. It does not need the other to be a villain in order to be a hero. Dr. Winona needed the man to be wrong, needed him to be the embodiment of patriarchal ignorance, because without him, her performance had no audience and her identity had no contrast. Love would have answered the question. Possession made the question impossible to ask. Back to natural order. Here's what the natural order looks like, stated without apology. Words have stable meanings, or they are not words. A thing is what it is. A is A. The law of identity is not a patriarchal construct. It is the grammar of reality itself, the condition without which thought, speech, and action become impossible. When Dr. Winona rejected definition, she did not liberate meaning. She destroyed it. And in the ruins, only power remains, which was, as it happens, exactly what she wanted. Excellence is real. Some work is high caliber, some is not. This is not violence, it is recognition. Hierarchy based on merit is not oppression. It is the natural consequence of differential skill, effort, and devotion. A civilization that refuses to distinguish between the excellent and the mediocre will produce neither. It will produce panels. It will produce rants. It will produce professors who cannot define their own vocabulary and students who applaud them for it. Men's caliber, defined competence, disciplined strength, purposeful work is not a threat to be neutralized. It is the infrastructure of civilization. The roads, the courts, the power grids, the borders, the churches, the schools, the families, all of it rests on the labor of men who were told they had to be good at something and believed it. Telling men that their competence is oppression is not liberation, it is sabotage. And the civilization that practices it will discover soon enough what happens when the competent withdraw their consent. The natural order is logos, reality that is knowable, communicable, and judgeable. It is the order described in Genesis: distinction before union, naming before knowing, hierarchy before harmony. Light is separated from darkness, waters from dry land, male from female, each according to its kind. This is not a story about oppression. It is a story about the preconditions of flourishing. Without distinction, there is no identity. Without hierarchy, there is no order. Without definition, there is no truth. Dr. Winona's entire performance was an attack on this order. She attacked definition because definition distinguishes. She attacked binary thinking because binaries identify. She attacked caliber because caliber measures. Each attack was an attack on logos itself, on the proposition that reality has a structure that precedes our preferences and survives our denials. The natural order does not require Dr. Winona's permission. It does not require anyone's permission. It is the terrain on which all preferences, ideologies, and power bids operate. You can deny it, you can invert it, you can build an entire career on pretending it does not exist, but gravity does not negotiate. And a civilization that abolishes caliber will find, when the bridge collapses, that physics was not listening to the panel, the question that ends it. There's one question that Dr. Winona cannot answer, cannot deflect, cannot invert, cannot slogan into silence. It is the question that her entire rant was designed to prevent anyone from asking, and it is this: if caliber is just a patriarchal construct, why do you tremble when you realize you have none? The question detonates the ideology from within. If caliber, the measurable quality of excellence, is merely a weapon of domination, then its absence should be a matter of indifference. A liberated woman, secure in her framework, should feel nothing when asked to demonstrate hers. She should answer the question, or laugh it off, or provide an alternative metric. She should not need 90 seconds of defensive monologue to avoid 5 seconds of honest reply. But she did need it, because the question touched the nerve the ideology exists to protect. She does not lack caliber because caliber is oppressive. She lacks it because she has not done the work that produces it. And rather than do that work, rather than read more carefully, think more rigorously, write more honestly, submit her claims to the standards she demands of others, she constructed an entire intellectual apparatus to explain why the standards themselves are the problem. This is the secret at the center of the ideology. It is not a critique of power. It is a rationalization for inadequacy. It does not dismantle oppression. It dismantles the means of detecting incompetence. And it does so with the full institutional backing of universities, HR departments, publishers, platforms, professional bodies, and family courts that have been captured by the same logic. The question that ends it is also the question that begins the way out. Ask it of every professor who cannot define her terms. Ask it of every HR director who cannot specify the harm. Ask it of every family court judge who cannot articulate the standard. Ask it of every theologian who cannot state the doctrine. Ask it of every journalist who cannot cite the evidence. Ask it of every activist who cannot name the remedy. If your framework is so superior, why does it collapse the moment someone asks you to demonstrate it? The answer, which they will never give, is written across every second of Dr. Winona's rant. They tremble because they have nothing. And they have built a civilization-wide machinery to ensure that no one is allowed to notice. Notice anyway. Define your terms, demand definition, measure, caliber, name the inversions. Restore the order. And when they tell you that your question is violence, remember, a question that powerful people cannot answer is not a weapon. It is a diagnostic instrument. And the disease it diagnoses is theirs, not yours. Field manual. Q. She refuses to define a key term. The room stills. She interprets your request for clarity as aggression. The monologue begins. Wrong idea. Definition is a patriarchal weapon. Ambiguity is liberation. To demand precision is to enact violence. Inversion, clarity becomes oppression. Confusion becomes wisdom. The lucid mind is recoded as the dangerous one. Question. If your truth is purely subjective, why do you demand I submit to your objective authority over meaning? Restoration. Definition is the precondition for communication, not a prelude to domination. A person who cannot define her terms has no claim on your compliance. Walk away from the fog. Q. She invokes lived experience as an unassailable trump card against evidence, data, or counter-narrative. Wrong idea. Personal feeling outranks public reason. Her experience is revelation. Your data is oppression. Inversion. Subjective sensation becomes objective fact. Shared evidence becomes personal attack. Question. If I cite my lived experience of being harmed by your grievance, does that make it true, or does the rule only work one direction? Restoration. Experience is evidence to be weighed, not a moral veto that ends conversation. Truth is not privatized. Weigh her claim against reality. If it fails, name the failure. Q. She attacks your tone instead of your argument. Calm assertion gets labeled aggressive. Precision becomes binary. Stillness becomes violence. Wrong idea. Emotional comfort is the highest institutional value. Disagreement is indistinguishable from harm. Inversion. Assertion becomes aggression. Fragility becomes authority. The person who feels most governs what is real. Question. Why is your emotional sensitivity my rhetorical prison? Since when does the weakest nerve ending dictate the boundary of truth? Restoration. Ideas stand or fall on their merit, not on the comfort they produce. Demand she distinguish harm from offense. If she cannot, she has no argument, only a mood pretending to be a verdict. Q. She dismisses male achievement as privilege, reframes competence as exclusion, and calls for leveling down in the name of equity. Wrong idea. Men's excellence is theft from women. Equality requires identical outcomes, not equal standards. Inversion. Merit becomes oppression. Ambition becomes greed. Envy becomes justice. Question. If your standard of fairness is this fluid, how can you be certain you're pursuing justice rather than dressed up resentment? Restoration. Excellence is not zero-sum. Achievement creates the infrastructure everyone depends on. Name the envy beneath the equity language. The woman who cannot celebrate competence will eventually criminalize it, and she will call that criminalization compassion. Q. She demands you speak, but only her script. Silence earns the label complicit. The wrong words prove you're dangerous. Correct words prove you're trainable. The wrong idea. Failing to perform ideological allegiance is an act of violence. Your voice belongs to her movement. Inversion. Compulsory speech becomes liberation. Voluntary silence becomes harm. Freedom means saying exactly what she approves. Question. If silence is violence, why is your monologue the only permissible sound in this room? Restoration. True freedom includes the right to remain silent and the right to dissent. Coarse speech is tyranny wearing a compassion mask. No institution that punishes silence deserves your loyalty. State the principle. Hold the line. Q. She references DEI mandates, HR policies, or safe space provisions to veto your question, not because it violates a rule, but because it threatens her narrative control. Wrong idea. Institutions exist to manage feelings, not to pursue truth. Compliance is virtue. Inquiry is suspicion. Inversion. Bureaucracy becomes morality. Submission becomes character. The form replaces the conscience. Question. When the institution protects her feelings instead of your rights, is that justice or is that one-party rule with paperwork? Restoration. Rules must be neutral, reciprocal, and enforceable against both sides. A policy that only silences one party is not a policy. It is a weapon disguised as procedure. Document the asymmetry. Expose the one-way ratchet. Demand the standard survive a sex swap test. Detonating question. If caliber is just a patriarchal construct, why do you tremble when you realize you have none? One rule to carry. I have watched the rant enough times to know its anatomy. A woman or her proxy stands before a room, a camera, a tribunal, and unleashes a torrent of words that do not mean what they appear to mean. The words are not tools of communication. They are instruments of escape from definition, from accountability, from the terrible weight of being wrong. The room freezes because no one can pin the words to the board. The words writhe and shift, slippery as something fossilized and half-resurrected, a form without a spine, a shape without a skeleton. Everyone feels the wrongness. No one can name it. That inability to name is the entire game. If you cannot define what attacked you, you cannot defend yourself. If you cannot identify the inversion, you will absorb it as your own guilt. Here is the rule I leave you. The single discipline that separates the free man from the scripted partisan. When a rant runs around the room, make the words stand still. Pin each term to its definition. Identify the projection. What she accuses you of is what she cannot face in herself. Name the inversion, the vice dressed as virtue, the envy disguised as justice, the control called care, the cowardice called safety. Then restore natural order. Truth is truth, merit is merit, male is male, female is female, and no amount of linguistic sorcery changes the grammar of reality. You do not argue with the rant. You exercise it by refusing to let its vocabulary remain undefined for 1 second longer than it takes to say. What exactly do you mean by that word? Demand the definition. Watch the spell collapse. The modern leftist rant survives only in the fog of undefined terms. Clarify the air and the demon has nowhere to hide. This is your inheritance as a man under logos. You were built to name things. The first man's first act was naming. Every tyrant, every sophist, every captured institution depends on your forgetting that. They need your words fluid. God made yours solid. When you define, distinguish, and restore, you are not merely winning an argument. You are rebuilding civilization one recovered syllable at a time. The Neanderthal in you knows the world is real, the word is its seal, and the man who holds both holds the future. Sponsored book. Awaken your inner Neanderthal, supercharging your life with 8 evolutionary secrets. You're holding a book that will piss off the right people. My name's Conrad Riker, and I spent decades watching men get softer, myself included. I tried therapy, kale smoothies, and mindfulness retreats. Then I realized the problem wasn't me. It was modernity's war on biology. This book isn't a self-help guide. It's a field manual for surviving an era that pathologizes masculinity while parasitizing your paycheck, health, and purpose. If you're tired of being told your ambition is toxic by people who've never built anything, if you're sick of diets that turn you into a bloated soy experiment, if you suspect your ancestors' DNA contains more wisdom than a gender studies department, keep reading. If not, close this book now and go knit a sweater. I wrote this for men who'd rather study mitochondrial DNA than Marxist theory. Men who know bipedalism wasn't about pushing strollers but wielding spears. Men who'd rather hack their pineal gland with sunlight than numb it with antidepressants. You'll learn why 8% of your genome is viral code that could kill you or make you unstoppable. You'll discover why warlords who ate raw liver outlived vegan activists, why your gut microbes dictate whether you lead or cower, and why marriage courts are the new Colosseum where beta males get devoured. This isn't theory, it's biology stripped of apologies. Every chapter, from retroviruses to testosterone, exposes lies that keep men docile. You'll get tactics, not TED talks. Replace gym routines with primal sprinting. Swap antidepressants for sunlight. Trade divorce settlements for bloodline strategies. Weakness dies here. Your ancestors didn't cross glaciers, survive plagues, or conquer continents so you could binge Netflix while estrogenic plastics melt your balls. Non-negotiables: if you think toxic masculinity is a real term, if you believe gender is a social construct, if your role models wear pronouns in their bios, stop reading. This book will offend you. For everyone else, your DNA's been waiting 200,000 years for this moment. Time to arm it. Awaken your inner Neanderthal, supercharging your life with 8 evolutionary secrets. Written by Conrad Riker. Buy now, links in description.